So where have we come from? Grandchildren asked the grandmother. And grandmother explained old-fashioned way. You were found in the cabbage, and you were found in potatoes. You were found under the willow, and you were found at the poplar tree. Your father found you in the straw near the kitchen. And then one grandchild responded, that's a terrible family. I could run away from this home. Not even one person came into this world human way. So Pavlo Lozovy raises in this poem a very important question. According to this story, Stanislav, do you have a place where you were found? How did they teach you where you were? Where did you come from? You know, Vasyl, I had two options where I could be found. One place was the straw at the attic, or under the pecan tree. Two places. These were two places. So how do you explain this important and complicated thing in a simple way? Sometimes not very easy. So Stanislav and I would talk about how to talk to teenagers about that. I'm Vasyl Ostry. I'm pastor of Irpin Bible Church, and I'm father to 4 children. Stanislav. I'm Stanislav Gruntkovsky, also one of pastors of Irpin Bible Church, and I'm father to 3 boys. 3 sons. I have daughters, so it would be interesting, very interesting. I really hope we don't have our mothers. They could tell us some things, but we'll talk about the role of the father today. So Stanislav, do you have funny stories related to this topic, or to your children when they were small, or to you personally with a topic that you cannot express? You cannot even give the name of it, the topic of that. Everything about that, everything about that. Vasyl, I don't remember exactly that my mother would talk to me about that, or my stepfather. One day, something very unusual or even funny happened. A very unusual situation for me. My mother found, I am terrified to tell you, a condom at my desk, where I was doing my homework, and I was 16 at that time. So my mother asked me, how did it come to be on my desk? The thing is, in a town near ours, Nityshin, there was a whole area where Polish guest workers lived. They came to Ukraine, they helped building Khmelnytsk nuclear power plant, and they were also selling things. They were earning more by buying things in Poland and selling them in Ukraine. So with my cousin, I went to this Polish base, and we were changing moonshine. That was a terrible age in my youth age. We were exchanging moonshine to something more valuable. That could be a tie or interesting belt, posters, pins with rock stars. And also I remember that they gave some condoms as a gift for us, and that's how one got to my desk. So the mother asked, son, what is that? And I had to explain where it came from. That's it. That was the end of the conversation. You didn't explain what it was, you just explained where it came from. Right. I had 2 stories, but they are related to my girls. I have all girls. I have no boys, and they are playing. 2 girls are playing boy toys, and they are completely naked. And one says, mine is naked. The other says, mine is also naked. And the first one puts the hat on and says, my doll is not naked anymore. The story when I felt uncomfortable, lost, was maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little more, when 2 families, several families of my friends from the church came to our home, and we were reading the Bible according to the church plan, according to the description of how the church reads, and we had some tea, and then we read the Bible. And then there were boys among friends, and so we have 4 girls, and they have a couple boys. We were reading from the Old Testament, and there was topic of circumcision, and the boy asked what circumcision is. In presence of everyone, we all are reading the scripture, the adults and the children. girls are asking other questions, and he's asking, what's circumcision? And the parents are turning to me, Pastor, explain to children what circumcision is. And I said something, this is a special sign on the body of a boy. And I moved the subject. But I was confused for sure. And Stanislav, what do you think from the side? Was it right place and time to tell more extended answer? Vasyl, I think you gave a very wise response. You gave response to directly the question that was asked without additional explanations. You also gave answer that was a hint to whom it relates, to whom? To the boy. And that's a special sign. How old were the boys? I don't remember, maybe 8. I think for that situation, that was just a perfect response. Clear, honest, and laconic. Very brief. But I felt pressure. Why? Because I have all the girls. I looked at them, at the boys, the parents who threw me under the bus. But I think majority of those parents, when they get into a situation when son or daughter comes and asks the question, Father, what's sex? Father, Mom, what is, and they call anatomic part of the body they've heard in the school, not in the best terms. Majority of parents would feel what you feel. Tell me, the parents, did you feel this shyness when you spoke to your sons? Yes. Maybe it was simpler when I had this first conversation with my sons about that. That was age of maybe 6, but when they grew to be, say, 9 or 10, and with time older, then I noticed that the older the children get, the harder it is to talk about that topic. Do parents have a certain bias to this topic? Why would they not raise this topic? Yes, without doubt, I think there are certain barriers inherited by us from our parents, of course. First, majority of parents, my parents, for example, were part of that generation. They were hoping for 2 things. When he grows up, he will understand something somehow. Or they were hoping that teachers will do this work at grade 6, at a biology lesson. There will be anatomy discussion, and teachers will talk about that. But I think part of parents have fear, and they don't know how to talk about that properly. But there was also another extreme. Drunk men, fathers were, when they were drunk, they would gather children around and they will explain things in bad terms. When they were drunk, they would use bad words, dirty, brutally, not nice too directly. Right. So we see there is some bias and fear. What other fears we might have? I think one of those fears, the vocabulary that you should use. What words? You can use scientific words, but at what age or now will it work? By the way, Vasyl, if we're talking about first conversation with children about that, it's interesting how it's happening with girls, because we have boys. But as a rule, most often that would be age of 5 or 6, when children by themselves come to one of parents and will ask that simple question, where did I come from? Where did I come from? Or they heard something, heard word sex. 2 questions, what's sex and where did I come from? And majority of specialists believe that, of course, is it enough to explain briefly, laconically, precisely, and allegorically? When I spoke to my last youngest son, Timothy, I used the allegory of the seed. My father had a seed, and he loves mother, shared this seed with mother. She carried the seed under her heart, and then after some time, you appeared. For a majority of children aged 5 to 6, this brief story will be enough. Later, additional questions will come and we'll find a way to answer how this happens with girls, you asked. Well, we read books with children, different topics, Bible stories, fairy tales, or some children encyclopedia. We have one of those books, in my opinion, quite successful, Mother, Father, and Me. That's how it looks. That's the format. For example, in fact, this is a story of everything. How the children are born. The most interesting picture is this. Your favorite? Actually, it's most favorite for the children, because that's where you have comparison. When a child is born from mother's tummy, it starts with a size of strawberry, then apricot, then apple, and so on. And they love this page more than anything else. Naturally, we read all the books. We also read this one, and it's located, and we explain. If you have more questions, you ask also while we are reading. It's also at their shelf, and they're reading, looking through it, older and smaller. That's a process. But the main sources of getting information, we read that you are father or mother, or I am a father, we tell the children. But according to studies, the main sources of knowledge about sexual relationship for youth and teenagers, where do they get this information? First, the first source, internet. That's it. You see, we are too old already, because for me and for you, the first source of information was not internet, but friends. Maybe not friends, street. We call it street. Teenagers, peers. In second place, interesting, that would be peers, teenagers, or street. And then third place, third source, parents and teachers. Not so good, but I would say not so good, not so bad, not so good, because it's not parents. Teenage sexuality has this quality or character of experimenting. They're testing out the new ideas. And as I read for this discussion, this knowledge from internet has not decreased. In Ukraine, the number of sexually transmitted diseases or teenage pregnancy and all the problems related. That's an important topic. Friends, thank you for watching us. If you have in our discussion with Stanislav some questions or comments, what resources you use to talk to your children, please write in your comments and I'll be reading them. Stanislav, how many conversations should we have with our children about sexual education? Vasyl, I will gladly share my parental experience. In my opinion, until the age of 12, maybe at least 3 such conversations need to happen at different times, at different periods, with different depth and directness of information. As I already explained, the first conversation was somewhere between 5 and 6, when we needed to explain it was not under the walnut tree, not in the cabbage, and it was not by the stork. Father and mother were involved. Beautiful comparisons of the grain, seed, under heart paint a beautiful picture, beautiful story that is sufficient at the time. Then, without doubt, children who are growing in informational environment from their classmates, or maybe from the TV, or maybe in advertising, they hear this word sex and they want to know what sex is. And maybe then at age of 9 or 10 or earlier, it depends. We had the second conversation when I try to explain in more detail to my son what intimacy is, when 2 people, husband and wife, who love each other, who are not dressed, they're in the bed, they caress each other, and it's important to mention different anatomical parts of our body, different organs at age of 9 and 10. I explained to Timothy and added 2 words to his vocabulary, penis and vagina. I explained what that was because I really liked when, I really wanted when he hears other words to explain these special parts of our body that we hide, not to have some negative associations that this is some unneeded, ugly part of the body, or some worse parts, or invaluable parts of the body. I wanted him to have respect to himself as creation of God. But also, I briefly explained what intimacy is, using those 2 terms. Remembering when our brief conversation of 15 minutes was finished, Timothy went to the kitchen. Allah was doing something there, and he announced these 2 words. Vasyl, you have not seen the reaction of my wife. Father, what happened? Where did these words come from? And I came and I explained, and she was understanding. Was it spontaneous conversation? No, I don't think so. As a rule, it's surprising. It's not that we as parents would think that this initiative should be ours for sure, but it happens naturally when children ask those questions. They don't ask questions at the age of 5 or 6. Then, well, there could be another way, but it's exaggerated when parents try to explain intimacy to children in older words than they need in their age. So as these words come in, it's important to build this trusting relationship. Then we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We show openness to the child, that the child can come to us at any time with any question, and we'll find opportunity to talk and to explain. That's important to build emotional closeness with children, an atmosphere of trust, because when my son heard first swear words, I think I told you at one of our discussions, we for several weeks I heard new words from him. He was bringing them from school, and we had to explain what it means and how we should not use these swear words to explain our body parts or actions in marriage. Initiative of parents, and about sharing more information than child needs. I think this is one of fears. It's like, I don't know this territory, I have never walked it. As a father or the mother, I need to walk it for the first time to explain this to children. So there is no question from child why this should be explained. I'm afraid to tell more, and I will attract more attention to these things more than necessary. That's from one side. But also, the child might not ask questions. They've heard something, and they're not announcing these swear words to explain the human body parts. They've heard this information, but it doesn't come out. Vasyl, I really believe that in our children, there is this beautiful, I would not say program, but innate need, desire to talk to parents. Their children, remember, they ask questions on different topics. Why so? What is that? Where this goes and why? Again and again. So the key point is not to be too busy when they ask simpler questions at 3, 4, 5 years of age, and not to skip those things, not to miss, to be sensitive. But when we have seen that our children are using these words, then for sure we need to take initiative. Okay? You have shared the 2 discussions you had with your children at age of 6, the first one, and then we understand the meaning, simple words. Anatomy is explained the difference between boys and girls if necessary, and how long did this discussion take? Not so long. I think maybe that was 5 to 7 minutes. There were no clarification questions, not many. That's about boys, but how do you explain different anatomic parts to girls? That's interesting. For one thing, Alyona is doing this more naturally. She's mother, yes, naturally. But not to make this too secretive or a wrong attitude to these organs, but on the other hand, to raise respect. It's done in context of hygiene lessons every evening when father and mother prepare children to sleep. These are lessons of hygiene. All girls are involved. My sister, when she was having boys and she was changing diapers, and girls noticed, that was a different discussion. But when Alyona explains this to girls, she calls these parts of body secrets. Yes, she calls them little secrets. They're normal names, of course, but why we call that secrets? Because that cannot be shown to somebody else. That's your secret. You must preserve it and not to show it to anybody. Mother can, or father, during washing, but you cannot show it to anybody else. That's respect to your body on one hand, but also this is something not for everyone. Right. By the way, some specialists convince that when we have to discuss the question of sexual safety and danger, we need to explain to the child this correct understanding of these secrets, that these secrets could be touched or seen for specific reasons. Hygiene, fathers and mothers helping with hygiene, or doctors when there is need, necessity. And also with permission of parents, of course, how this is happening. There are rules, there's medical ethics. But when you explain to children that nobody else can touch these secrets except for themselves, parents when they help in hygiene issues, and doctors when necessity arises. What else is important to say? There are secrets that are pleasurable, nice secrets when they are preparing surprise for mother and father, and they keep it secret. But there are wrong secrets, bad secrets, when someone foreign, someone, man or woman, would touch their secrets and would ask this to be kept secret from father and mother. This is example of very bad secrets. That way we need to save child from the people who can use that topic for evil. Two thoughts, two observations related to what you said. There is recommendation from doctors and social workers to teach children the right names of these parts of the body. Because in this unpleasant topic, where there is abuse of children, very often the abuse comes, unfortunately, from known people. When this unfortunately happens, it comes from known uncles, aunts, cousins, maybe. There is said part of cases that comes from the family members. So we need to explain to them what has happened in right terms. Let's talk about third conversation. At the age of 12, 13, 14, the teenage excitement about this issue is different. If before the children were interested just where they came from, and where they were interested in explanation of certain terms they've heard from somebody else, they just wanted to know. Then at that age, there is more interest in experience. So we need to explain at this time, when we talk about boys, what's pollution, what's masturbation, and also intent of God for intimate life, that you would grow up. This is something nice and beautiful, created by God for children to be born, for joy and pleasure and intimacy in marriage. But also we need to talk about most common dangers that destroy our sexuality as pearl, as a gift. What can take the pearl of purity and throw it into the dirt? That would be pornography. And we need to start talking about this from age 12, 13. So the parents need to take initiative and be brave, because it's not parents who would be shy to talk about this topic, even unpleasant. It would be children who would be shy or ashamed. In our age, teenagers shared these types of knowledge, but now internet is full of such knowledge. And there are social networks and groups about classes, and sometimes these groups and social networks discuss sexuality, and the situation becomes known and it has to be discussed. Of course, this is reaction on hot topics, but still, it does not remain secret. When we talk about this, I remembered how important it is for parents at early teenage years and then later teenage years to take initiative and to talk about this topic. What convinces me, that's Proverbs of Solomon. When father begs the son, says, "Son, listen to my commandments. Son, listen to explanations of your mother." And then from the second proverb, he talks about unfaithful woman, the whore, and outcomes of giving in to this prostitute. And this is a unique book talking about life wisdom. You can see issues of friendship, alcohol, fast, dishonest incomes, and sexuality. This book of Proverbs explains initiative of parents, of the father, to talk to children about these issues. I think this is a great resource, because the topic of intimacy is among the chief. There are 3 or 4 chief topics. How to stay away from the prostitute, I think this chapter 5. Thank you, friends, for writing questions. We have questions from our chat here. How do we save children from pornography? You said that we need to talk about this, raise this topic on the third discussion. How do we save children from pornography? We should start with positives. We should explain sexuality as a gift. Explain that God has intended sexuality, and by God's design, sexuality is in framework. We need to explain to the children value of the borders. And when God created the ocean was limited by the land, and these borders of the ocean were filled by life, fish. Fish are very comfortable when they are in the borders. These are not borders of freedom. These are measures and borders of comfort for them. Let's break these borders. Let's pull the Black Sea dolphin and throw him into Carpathian mountains. Expand the limits. Breathe full air. And we understand when the dolphin gets out of the borders created by Creator for his harmonic life, tragedy happens. If we find a good bear in Carpathian mountains and take them from the forest into the ocean or throw him in the heaven and see if he flies, the same thing would happen. So when you explain to children there are borders that exist to help us live a good life. So when you talk about sexuality or intimacy set in the borders of marriage, and everything before marriage is not good, is not correct, is destructive. Without doubt, in these moments, we need to start talking about the fact that you will see people in your life who have different opinions, different thoughts, people who believe you can do it now at the age of 13, 14, 15. When you talk about men and women who earn money with it. They sell their body. They sell their beauty. They do this on camera so that they could earn some money with that, but others are paying money for that, and that's wrong because God has not invented intimacy for that purpose. We need to explain that pornography is like drug, is like alcohol. Several photos of people with addiction to explain that pornography creates addiction, destroys sexuality, and causes people to do wrong things. Without doubt, two technical issues. In addition to talking to the child about their worldview, system of values, as we explain, answer the question why I should preserve, why I should save myself, we need to explain technical aspects that help save our children. Parent control, internet filters. I use services of parent control. Screen time could be put on specific things, or, in my case, Wi-Fi router has a certain setup to filter all the content that comes into our home through internet and then is distributed by Wi-Fi. It's important to explain that it's a way to stay within the borders. And without doubt, Vasyl, we need to explain to our child that they can make mistakes. Maybe not in this domain, but make mistakes. And they can have temptation through fear of punishment or shame not to admit to those mistakes. We need to explain to children that if something does not work out or something happened that they are shamed for, we are here to help them be corrected. That will allow sons to see helpers and mentors in fathers, and daughters see mentors in mothers, because there are no children that would avoid pornography. Every child will face this filth at least once, but they need to be strong and motivated to share that. Paradox about my life. Before getting married, I was teaching lectures in schools and universities. These prevention lectures, excuses course and others, how to prevent sexually transmitted diseases and other things. But with my own children, I have no experience. Alyona is talking to the oldest, the teenager, and with little ones, mother Alyona also talks. We read the book, as I explained, but my role as a father to build these trusting relationships. I read statistics that girls who practice early sexual life or get under negative things, they have terrible relationship with their father. Their father is either cruel or they're not there at all, and they do not receive hugs and compliments of father. So compliments of some older boy melts the girly heart, and she confuses sex and love, and things happen like they do. Vasyl, you said important things. I'd like to give a comment, but then to boys, we need to explain identity of protector, not the cruel attacker, not like animals who attack, but those who protect. They need to be following values of protection, not instinct of attack. This is not just a girl. She's somebody's sister, somebody's grandchild, somebody's daughter, somebody's friend. Hurting her is not just shaming her, even if she agrees to this intimacy. That's hurting so many people. Identity of protector, not attacker. This is something we set in our family. Until the age of 3, the girls are hers. After 3, they're mine. In my, like in the Lion King cartoon, mother and father were sharing the day and night. So when sympathies appear to a boy, they must tell me, and I will talk to him for sure, because you're mine. I protect you. God created you in the way that father protects daughters, loves them, and protects them. And the time will come when, during wedding, the father will bring you to another man that God has intended for you to show love and care. Going back to question how to protect and preserve, we need to talk about God's intent for sexuality, God's design, talk about borders and limits, not to limit our freedom, of course, but to show the territory of comfort and harmony for us. We need to talk about what wants to steal this plan of God, destroy it, and pornography is one of those most powerful and spread viruses that destroy our moral values. We need to set filters, but also I believe this moment of accountability when, Vasyl, when you give a child a right to ask any question, in the same way, you receive from the child this right to ask any question, to take their gadget. Son and daughter, I want to see the passwords on your gadget, and father and child should not hide those gadgets away. Look at history, a search at programs that are installed. That's very important. Question of accountability, key point for children to understand that this is also a way to be protected. Not of control and tyranny, but way to help each other. It's also interesting when you discuss these borders with children, even the limits of using these gadgets. I remember one time when I looked at screen time through parent control, screen time on YouTube. The girl is looking at different recipes or life hacks, slimes and everything. But still, I've seen that the time was overspent. I was not at home at that time, but I sent a message, girl, daughter, what's with screen time? And she said, Daddy, I will not do that again. She understands. When these expectations are discussed, when you have a good relationship, then the child has a good response. By the way, you know what I noticed? And that's not a secret, but in our discussion, when we raise this topic, how to talk with children, with teenagers about sex, in our discussion, the main statement is healthy relationship, conversation, and not surface, but quite deep, heartily, sincere, and ongoing. Parents should be accessible and open for the moments when the child falls, when the child gives in to temptation, or when someone hurts our child. That's very important. Another question. We are talking here, our children live in complete families. They have father, mother who love them, and they try to do everything for them. But unfortunately, there are cases, I was raised without father, and I was raised without father. So right now, there are people who raise children, father without the wife, or mother without a husband. How do these people protect their children? How can mother protect a girl? What advice would you give? What is your thought? I think mother needs to be working 2 shifts. meaning that they need to take part of the role of the father, to be bold enough to talk to the son or to sons about these topics, the topic that the father should have explained. That's very important. Also, what's really important, Vasyl, you understand there are three most influential factors to impact our children as persons. Heredity that we don't control. I'm very impulsive, emotional, fast, oriented at relationships more than at goals. I'm not very disciplined, possibly. It's not something I chose. I can change, I can improve, I can become better, no doubt. But in addition to heredity, what else would influence? Environment. Where are our children? If you live in toxic environment, physically toxic environment, that would be reflected at your physical health, physical state. Even your mentality, a possibility to be realized. Environment is very important. So two key aspects, friends and parents, whether there are two of them or just one, mother or father. It's important for the parents to study the circle of friends of their children, ask questions that would help look into the keyhole of their relationships. Because when child explains who their friends are, you can look into their world briefly. Maybe invite them to the home, to your home, to listen, to watch what they're talking about, how they relate to our child, the topics they raise and discuss. This is a very important aspect, not to skip, not to miss. Who are heroes for our children? Who do they model themselves after? Whose wind is in their sails? Same thing online. Parents who are raising children alone, they need to watch. It's good for husband and wife to be partner in this matter, but we come both from families where only mothers raised us and they succeeded, praise God. Yes, we are very grateful to them for who we are today. I think another very important aspect as I analyze my life, and in principle, I see how this works in lives of other people, even when there are families without a father or a mother. Most often, children would be with a mother, but the role of a man is very important. If father does not live with you, and if he is a bad example, some meetings with father, if possible, are preferable. Of course, if the father is toxic, then not the role of a coach or grandfather in my case, or uncle or godfather, it's very spread in Orthodox culture, or in the church. I think we need, this is natural, we need to be attentive to such families in the church where children are raised without a father or without a mother, and I think that other families, brothers and sisters from the church could play this role of a father. And this is good time to thank the teenage ministry of Irpin Bible Church, Igor Balan, and all their team. It's so good when, in addition to parental influence, good or bad, there are young people older by age than our children. They become their heroes and examples. So teenage ministry in the church, in my opinion, is very strategic, among most important. I have some friends that come from Luhansk, Sasha and Vitaly. They moved to our part of Ukraine, and Sasha initiated this movement, Wise Carpenter. Sasha initiated it. I've heard about that. I've seen their video, great. That's Vitaly making video. Now Vitaly is in Cherkasy, Sasha lives in Kyiv. They gathered boys together. They started making things out of wood, different crafts. And their motivation was that many children lack manly influence, and Vitaly took it on. That's a great movement. And it's not just hitting the hammer, it's manly support that we are talking about. So boys, Sasha, Vitaly, thank you for this movement. And I know this is a very powerful movement throughout the churches of Ukraine. That's a great opportunity to influence boys from such families. Influence all. Some questions from the chat. Okay. Is it normal to raise boys by showering between father and son? In my opinion, it's better to have separate showers. In our Ukrainian culture, there is banya, sauna, became Olympic sports for some. I remember when Nazar, my middle son, went to banya for the first time. I was shocked. I was shocked so much from everything I have seen there. That was traumatic. You brought him too late. No, I think this issue of intimacy should be preserved. There is age of children when child is not ashamed. Parents are helping the child to manage these rules of hygiene. In the first, child does not know how to do that, but we need to explain to the child as early as possible that they need to be self-sufficient in these matters, and then you don't need those things. Okay? Another interesting question. How do you teach to the children biblical view on same-sex marriage and school influence on gender identity? That's how you teach with the Bible. Take Bible texts. There are some good books that are written on the topic, brochures and books. For example, Evil, How This Can Be Prevented, very fundamental work on the topic of LGBT. There is also a very good brochure that we have discussed before, when the one who identifies themselves not as a gay person, but as a person who has attraction to same-sex, sexual attraction, but he's a Christian, and he describes and gives very interesting, good, fresh view on biblical texts as they're often misinterpreted. One way, there are very good biblical texts that give opportunity to children to understand that this is not part of God's design. That's where we need to work. Also, Love Against Homosexuality. There is such a website. I think there are many good articles on this topic, so you need to Google them up. Some key, basic texts in the Bible that should be used as foundation. That would be enough. What would you tell a child? Why someone needs sexual relationship? To a child, yes, we need to understand what age this child is. Because, for example, in principle, at age of 6, you can tell them that intimate relationship is given by God to give pleasure and excitement between mother and father. Father and mother give pleasure and joy to each other. This is something very beautiful, but also for children to be born. These are not just two goals that God has envisioned when He gave us this gift called sexuality. It's important to understand that this is also a way to reach unity. Intimacy is very thin, a very special part of our lives. It's like cherry on the cake. When husband and wife have high level of trust, high level of emotional closeness, harmony, and romantics, that's where they would experience the highest pleasure. This gift is given for husband and wife to learn to love each other, not themselves, not to take what they think belongs to them, but to give joy, pleasure, and excitement. And also in understanding that world is spoiled, broken, and sexuality is among the biggest temptations. God gives intimate relationship in marriage to protect each other from devil and everything related to sexual sins. We mentioned that there are many resources. You mentioned resources on identity and attitude to the same sex or attraction to the same sex. And there are some resources for children. We did not have intention to review all the books today. Not today. But are there filters? Are there markers? Because there are many books, video clips on line. There are books in Ukrainian and Russian, and people would like to buy something for their children. What filters and markers we need to be careful of? Very interesting question, and I think, and I'm interested to see if you agree with me or not, but there are two main filters that come to my mind. First filter relates to when you should begin intimacy. Because majority of books that try to explain in a very simple and beautiful way to children and teenagers what sex is, what intimacy is, when and for what purpose, you can agree with majority of information in those books. But when these books start convincing you that at the age of 16 you can start sexual life, or at the age of 17 you could start sexual life, and in order to prevent negative outcomes like sexually transmitted diseases or expected pregnancy that brings early childbirth or childbirth in earlier age, or to prevent abortions, you should use a contraception, condoms. But if this book explains that sex is normal before marriage, I cannot agree with that. Second filter, we come into the age, we are part of the age when they are teaching to our children gender identity is not defined by your sexual setup, but your feelings. That's dangerous, that's unbiblical, and that's terrible. When boy at age of 6, 7, and 8 is hinted that he should not be just a boy because his secret is different from girly secret. That's evil thing. These two filters that destroy biblical intent of sexes and differences, this beautiful intent of variety created by God to reach harmony in marriage, when they incite children to start premarital sex with contraception, that's two big stop signs for me, because that's very different from God's way. I agree that these two huge stop signs, like you were saying, huge markers, that should be a topic of discussion for children, or I'm not taking this book, I'm not buying this book. The thing is, when you make a choice, you should look for books, and you can find those books where you don't have to filter these things out yourself, not to tell son, okay, you read these pages, but here's where we disagree. They're beautiful books, completely, but you need to talk about those things, because in school, in their social networks, in their groups, they will discuss those questions for sure, and they need to be quite strong to give argumented position sincerely. So we need to find books that will not have wrong ideology of author. We live in time, or in other places, people talk about gender, they talk about same-sex relations, and that person needs to feel and identify, but we need to explain to our children, how to explain to the children of our church families, Christian families, that there are different views. There was Masha in your class and she became Ruslan. How do you explain that to children? Vasyl? I think we explain to our children that not everyone believes in God. Even when people believe in God, they don't always believe in the same God as we believe. Even if they believe in the same God as we believe, they don't believe the same way as we believe. We live in the world where people have different attitudes to many aspects: alcohol, money, honesty. And question of sexuality is another question where there are different views. So talking about the fact that we must trust God, that His plan is the best, that when we follow His design, His principles, sincerely and wholeheartedly, we reach the beauty that He intended from the beginning, as we read in book of Genesis, God created something very good. We need to talk about this, not to ignore these topics. We cannot cut this out of the world, and we cannot cut it out of public discussions. For good or for bad, we can't cut those things out. These are realities where we live, and children need to know why we believe so and so, but also recognize that there are people who think differently. We were born in atheistic times when our class teacher said there is no God, and if you go to a church on Easter or on Christmas, then we'll notice you and there will be hurt for you. My wife, Alla, she lived in a Christian family, and there was government pressure against the Christians, but her parents, other Christians, have survived this pressure. We now have new challenges, new pressures, but we can stand just as strong. Another question. At what age you can tell children about abortions, show embryos, and is it acceptable in Sunday school? It's interesting that even in the book that you have demonstrated, it could be used as a road map to explain sex at age of 6, 8, or 10, depending on what's the level of interest of children in these matters. There is already a description of how a child, a baby, develops. We become alive from the very moment of miracle of conception. This is a very painful topic, of course, and without details of terror, evil of abortion when unborn baby is killed. I think at that age of 10, you can mention those words, but it's a very painful topic. You need to be very careful. When we talked to our boys about that, they were already high schoolers when we talked about facts, illustrations, and methodologies by video or by photo to explain what stands behind this hidden word, abortion. Someone wrote this comment that at baby shower we showed a picture of a film of how God creates a baby inside mother, and children who attended that baby shower were excited to see this beautiful video. Great idea. Stanislav, we've been talking for an hour. It's enough to talk about that. How do we talk to teenagers about that? So let's make summary, conclusion, and good recommendations. Okay. Dear fathers and mothers, our God is unique. He intended us. He designed us to be boys and girls, men and women. And intimacy, sexuality, is not something ugly, unvalued, or sinful, as it was looked at for a long time in history of the church. Intimacy is not God in itself. Also, because now we live in time when sex was deified and people worship sexuality as idol. That's wrong too. It's gift of God, truly, to give us pleasure. But by getting this pleasure, we could have objective reason to praise our Creator who envisioned that. It's for us to multiply worshipers of God by giving birth to children, to raise them with God, to reach closeness between husband and wife emotionally, among other things. This topic is bombarded by many temptations, huge temptations, and we need to understand that from early childhood, the worldview, the conscience of our children is attacked by the devil. The devil will try to put terrible weeds into the minds of our children that could grow into early sexual life or rebellion, immorality that would bring the sexual transmitted diseases or abortions later. So we need to take responsibility, reject all fear, overcome shame, and use the tools available to be really sensitive to talk to children throughout their different maturity stages, remaining very open to them. This is very important. So they could knock on our doors, not just at the age of 6 when they want to understand the meaning of the word sex for the first time, or when they are 14 when they fall in love, and when some boy would ask your daughter about intimacy and she would not understand whether it's wrong or right, so they could come to us with their fears and doubts. Fathers and mothers, let's build very close relationship with children so that through time of talking to them, through deep conversation, not at level of cliche and how are you, but sincere, deep conversations take a long time, so that finally we could help our children believe that God's design, God's rules for sexuality are the best, that they would be foundation for their next decisions. Thank you very much, Stanislav, for this discussion, for sharing your experience, for wise thoughts. Thank you, friends, for watching us, for watching our family topics. I'd like to remind you that it happens every Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We have family topics, and now we have launched a series about teenagers. So next Sunday at 2 o'clock, we'll continue this topic. If you like the video, of course, please write your comments, share it to your friends, like us, and we'll see you next Sunday. God be with you. All the best.